Time to hit the ground. Get ready to turn left. Turn left. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left. You have arrived at your destination. Your route guidance is now finished. Let's do this. Finding a new route. Turn right. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left. Get ready to turn left. Turn left. Keep right, and then exit right. Exit right.
this is a state crime, so he can't pardon himself if he goes back into office.
That's right.
That's Paul Butler, professor of law at Georgetown and former federal prosecutor. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
And you're listening to KWGS News at 6:18. I'm Ben Abrams. Tulsa mayoral candidates have plans for their first 90 days in office. At a forum held today, current County Commissioner Karen Keith focused on the city's affordable housing crisis.
I want people to know that Tulsa is open for business. I want to make sure that we are doing everything to help our developers get affordable housing out of the ground.
Casey Bradford, a Tulsa business owner, also says he would prioritize housing.
There's no one solution to homelessness. It's going to take a lot of different people with a lot of innovative ideas to prioritize community and care.
State Representative Monroe Nichols remains committed to education and youth services as his primary goals.
We're going to set up an Office of Children, Youth, and Families. I think it's really critical for us, the city, to understand how do we institutionalize our commitment to young people.
Nichols, Bradford, and Keith, along with Brent Van Norman, who is expected to announce his candidacy, will compete in August for the mayoral election. This forum was hosted by UMA Tulsa and the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Governor Kevin Stitt is considering a bill that would allow Oklahoma public school students to leave school for up to 3 hours a week to receive religious instruction. House Bill 1425 allows students to take an elective class at an independent entity like a church if their school board approves. Critics argue, though, that the law is too vague and creates legal liability for schools. You're listening to KWGS News.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by the George Kaiser Family Foundation, partnering with Tulsa Educare to transform the lives of very young children and their families through high-quality early childhood education, enhancing parenting practices, and strong partnerships with other organizations. More at Tulsa.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from Spiegel and Grau, publisher of Cheaper, Faster, Better: How We'll Win the Climate War by climate activist and investor Tom Steyer, offering answers and optimism in the fight against climate change. Available at bookstores everywhere. From Procter & Gamble, maker of Align Probiotic, a daily supplement designed by gastroenterologists to help relieve occasional bloating, gas, and abdominal discomfort. More at AlignProbiotics.com. And from the listeners who support this NPR station.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detrow.
And I'm Elsa Chang. For the first time in history, a former president of the United States has been convicted on criminal charges. Donald Trump has been found guilty of falsifying business records to influence the 2016 election. It is a historic verdict, and that is why we are now going to bring in Tim Naftali as a historian and was director of the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. Welcome back to All Things Considered.
Thank you, Elsa. My pleasure.
So, yeah, these words, historic, unprecedented. I mean, we've been using these words over and over in relation to Donald Trump, especially in the last few weeks as his trial has played out. But this moment, can we just take stock? Like, what does this moment mean to you in the longer arc of U.S. presidential history?
Well, this is a striking moment for two reasons. One, it's a demonstration of the power and strength of our judicial system. That someone as powerful as a former president of the United States could be, first of all, indicted and then found guilty by 12 of his peers. It also, though, has a powerful meaning, and that's that we have now running in a presidential election someone who could win, who is now a convicted felon. In 1920, Eugene V. Debs ran for president of the United States from a jail cell in Atlanta. But he was not a major party candidate. He ultimately got about 1 million votes, but he wasn't going to win. Warren G. Harding won that election. But we are facing the prospect now that in November, the winner of this election could be a convicted felon. And that puts us in a category I don't think we've ever wanted to be in. And that's the category of countries where powerful men seek public office in order to escape the consequences of their crimes. This is something that the United States has never had to face before, but there are sorry, sad examples of what can happen in other countries where this has happened before. One of the things I worry about is that we will see a torrent of poison, even worse than we saw during the Stop the Steal campaign, as President Trump will force other Republicans who are running for office to trash our judicial system. We are going to hear about our judicial system, things that, first of all, aren't true, but secondly, things that will undermine people's trust in our system. And it could have lasting consequences.
What do you think, whether or not Donald Trump becomes president again, what do you think this conviction on 34 counts means to the office of the president going forward? Does it damage it irreparably?
It will damage it. Well, countries evolve. This country survived a civil war. So I'm always careful about saying that things are irreparable. But it could take generations. If President Trump is reelected, I think the damage will be there for a long time. I think the verdict, that verdict, will be decided by the American people in November. If a convicted felon with 3 other indictments still hanging over his head is returned to office as our head of state and commander-in-chief, then our institutions and all of us are in for a very rough ride.
Well, we only have about 30 seconds left, but I do want to look outside of the United States. I mean, we're talking about the office of the presidency, but what does it mean for America's global standing to now have a former president convicted on criminal charges?
It sends a signal that in this country, should he be reelected, corruption is king, and the king is corrupt. If Donald Trump doesn't win in November, it's a sign that our institutions are strong and the powerful can be found guilty.
That is historian Timothy Naftali. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Elsa.
Now on the line, we've got NPR senior national political correspondent Mara Liasson. Hey, Mara.
Hi, Scott.
Let's pick up on that last point. You have been calling Donald Trump a stress test for democracy for 8+ years now. How does this factor in?
This is going to be the biggest stress he can put on the system, because what his strategy has been during this trial was to undermine faith in the justice system in case he got convicted. This is exactly the moment that he's been planning for, calling this a witch hunt, rigged. He knew that he had basically 2 ways to win. One was to be acquitted or have a hung jury, but the other was to convince enough people, voters, that this was a completely illegitimate exercise. What that will do to American democracy over time when a former president, possibly the next president, spends a lot of time and effort trying to undermine people's faith in the rule of law, in the justice system. This is going to, as Tim Naftali suggested, this is going to be a kind of litmus test for Republicans. There already were some other litmus tests, like the 2020 election was rigged, or they won't accept any results of an election unless Donald Trump wins. So the peaceful transfer of power is something that the Republican Party doesn't believe in, and now they're going to say they also don't believe in the justice system. So those have some pretty deep and far-reaching consequences, and I don't think we quite know the extent of what that'll be.
Right, you've seen up and down from the House Speaker on Republicans defending Trump, attacking this verdict by 12 New York jurors. I mean, this also leads to the question that we've been asking over and over again, but if you step back, it's a strange question. Is there a way that this guilty verdict in a criminal trial could help Trump politically because of the way that he has framed his campaign in grievance and saying, I'm the victim and I'm being attacked because I'm fighting for you?
Well, sure. I mean, that's, his grievances have been central to all of his campaigns, his political life, really. And we saw that certainly they helped him inside the Republican Party in the primaries. There's no doubt about that. The question that we were always asking ourselves was what happens when he gets to a general election? And what we do know from polling is, including from the latest NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll, which came out today, is that 67% of registered voters said that a guilty verdict would make no difference in how they vote, but 17% said it would be less likely, 15% said more likely. We also know from the primary polls that even Trump voters and Nikki Haley voters, when asked if he was convicted, would that make you less likely to vote for him, and a fair number of them said yes. Now, that was a hypothetical question. All of a sudden, it's not hypothetical anymore. So we'll see how that plays out. Up until now, it's been something that has helped him with his base, but we have some new facts on the ground.
And the last two elections have been incredibly close. The polls show it close, even with Trump ahead, and even a small amount of those voters shifting could make a difference in those key states we care about.
Yeah, absolutely. And but I do think that this is going to affect the tenor of the race. Right now, you've got one candidate that says he doesn't believe in the justice system. He did that in 2020 when even 61 judges, many appointed by him, looked at the election results, said that they were free of fraud, and he rejected that.
Mara Liasson, we got about 30 seconds left. What are your biggest questions about how Joe Biden handles this as a president and a candidate?
Well, that's going to be really interesting. He's going to clearly stand up for the rule of law, but he is now running against a convicted felon, and I think you're going to see his surrogates hammer that home almost every single day. It's unclear to me what Joe Biden himself will do.
Thanks, Mara.
Keep
Thank
right,
you.
and then exit right. Exit right.
This is NPR News.
Jim Henson created some of TV's most lovable characters.
I love you.
I love you too.
Ron Howard explores his legacy in the new film.
When you see these archives, you recognize a creativity that he and his wife Jane built their whole relationship and family around.
The man behind the Muppets on the next morning edition from NPR News.
Tomorrow morning from 5 to 9 on Public Radio 89.5.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by Green Country Habitat for Humanity Restore, providing deconstruction services, dismantling of and hauling away salvageable construction materials. Information about Restore Green Country locations and services at greencountryhabitat.org.
Public Radio 89.5, KWGS HD1, Tulsa. National Public Radio for Northeastern Oklahoma.
From NPR News, I'm Elsa Chang.
And I'm Scott Detrow. Donald Trump is now a convicted felon.
He is also the likely Republican presidential nominee.
How might this impact voters, the ones who are undecided?
And what does this mean for the future of the Republican Party? We look at the political implications after this news.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. A New York jury has found former President Donald Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts in his criminal hush money trial. NPR's Quill Lawrence is outside the courthouse in Manhattan. That's where the verdict was handed down earlier this evening.
The crowd outside the courthouse here erupted into cheers of USA and guilty when the verdict was finally announced. The pro-Trump demonstration side of this park was very quiet when, after just 2 days, most of which was spent re-examining evidence and getting instructions from the judge, 12 New Yorkers have pronounced Donald Trump guilty on 34 counts, the first U.S. president to be convicted of a crime. Trump has said he will appeal. In the hallway outside the courtroom, he criticized the judge, criticized the trial, and said that the real verdict will come on Election Day this November.
That's NPR's Quill Lawrence in New York. Well, just as Mexico's election season wrapped up, another candidate was gunned down. NPR's Ada Peralta tells us these elections have been marred by violence.
Just this general election cycle, more than 30 political candidates have been assassinated in Mexico. The latest is Jose Alfredo Cabrera Barrientos, who was running for mayor of a small town near Acapulco. Cabrera was at his closing rally surrounded by police who were supposed to be protecting him when a gunman shot him in the head at point-blank range. Xochitl Galvez, opposition candidate for the presidency, opened her closing rally by delivering the news. These days in Mexico, she said, being a political candidate is to risk one's life. Election day is Sunday. Ada Malta, NPR News, Mexico City.
This is NPR. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s presidential campaign is polling in the high single digits nationally, but he's not likely to win in November. As NPR's Stephen Fowler reports, his supporters don't feel their votes are wasted.
RFK's campaign is like the psychological evaluation known as the Rorschach test, a nebulous entity whose meaning and significance rests in the eye of the beholder. Democrats and Republicans see Kennedy as a spoiler who could tip the election to the other party. But voters like Susan Parker from Oklahoma disagree.
He inspires me personally, and I enjoy listening to him talk. I have a little bit of a cringe factor when I listen to the other two major candidates.
How many people like Parker show up for RFK in November in key swing states, and who they'd support otherwise could influence who wins the election. Stephen Fowler, NPR News.
The IRS is making its free tax return permanent and asking all states to join the program next year. The IRS tried the Direct File project for the first time this year, but on a limited basis for folks with very simple W-2s. The agency is inviting all 50 states and the District of Columbia to sign up and help people file their state returns for free in 2025. Well, stocks finished lower across the board on Wall Street today. Shares of Salesforce tumbled after reporting weaker revenue for the latest quarter. The Dow was down 0.8%. This is NPR.
And this is KWGS News at 6:34. I'm Ben Abrams. Representative A.J. Pittman is settling a case with the Oklahoma Ethics Commission after being accused of nearly $18,000 in fraudulently spending campaign funds. The Oklahoma Public Media Exchange's Katie Hallam has the details.
The settlement agreement between Pittman and the Ethics Commission says she was inappropriately using donated funds for personal expenses, inaccurately reporting donation amounts, and not accurately maintaining campaign records. Pittman agreed to pay back the amount she took plus an additional fine totaling a little over $17,000. The payments, made in 3 different installations over the next 2 years, totaled $35,000. The representative for an Eastside Oklahoma City district first ran for election in 2018 and is seeking another term this year. In Oklahoma City, I'm Katie Hallam.
This is KWGS News on Public Radio 89.5.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Ion Television, presenting the Scripps National Spelling Bee. The 2-night event airs Wednesday, May 29th and Thursday, May 30th at 8/7 Central on Ion. Learn more at spellingbee.com. From Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. And from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Scott Detrow in Washington.
And I'm Elsa Chang in Culver City, California. Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. The jury in the New York hush money trial found him guilty on all 34 criminal charges earlier today. Of course, Donald Trump is the presumptive Republican nominee for president. So, how might these guilty verdicts affect his candidacy and his campaign? That is something we are going to ask Ron Lange. He's a Republican strategist and held a number of top communications and strategy positions for Republicans in both the House and Senate. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Great to have you, Ron. So just let me get your reaction to the verdict. What is it?
First of all, it's really super surprising that he was found guilty on all 34 counts. I don't think anybody was expecting that. Or maybe if people were, many Americans weren't paying attention. So I think that you're going to take pause and notice this for sure.
Yeah. Well, conventional wisdom is that this will not hurt Trump among his hardcore supporters. Do you think that wisdom is correct?
Yeah, listen, you never want to have the title of convicted felon when you're running for president, ever. Having said all that, this is only going to help his candidacy with Republicans that were going to vote for him anyway, and maybe a sliver of independents. The big question is, how are the remaining, those small segments of the population that haven't made up their minds, how is this going to affect them one way or the other between by them, for sure. You know, and I think you just said this, but it's definitely not going to have any impact on Biden voters who are turning their backs on the on the current president's administration right now. That's not going to do anything to get them to change their mind to vote for President Biden. That's not a motivator. A motivator would be for Biden to do something that would motivate these voters to vote for them, vote for him. But I think that in order to pull over these independents, Trump is going to be banging the drum that he was unjustly convicted.
Can we talk about that strategy? Because I noticed, minutes after the verdict was read, his campaign sent out a fundraising email saying he is now a, quote, political prisoner. Does any candidate truly want to be known as a convicted felon? My guess is no. You mentioned probably not. At the same time, he is marketing off of the fact that he is now a convicted felon. So how do you frame what's happening right now? What the campaign strategy is?
Yeah, his political strategy has largely worked so far. By saying he's been persecuted by the courts, by doing that, he's cleared the field of anybody who wanted to oppose him. So he's now a Republican nominee. The fundraising site apparently this evening crashed because they had so many donors, and it's really working in his favor at this point. Whenever we think Donald Trump is down and out, there is the opposite effect is what occurs.
Right.
And I don't think this is going to affect his polling margins between him and Biden right now, especially in the swing states, because people are they're more dug in than ever before. I just don't see that really impacting, especially if they appeal the decision and this gets dragged out, and it becomes more diluted in the news as time goes on. Right now, it's a huge shock value today. This is a historic moment. This is the equivalent to me of like a January. People died on January 6th. That was, there are some differences, but in terms of our nation's history, this is a big seminal moment that a former president has been convicted. However, will it be diluted down by November? It could be, very well.
And do you expect Republicans, like Republican Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, to be talking about these convictions as, well, as he put it, absurd?
There's a huge rally effect going on right now with Republicans flooding the airwaves in support of the president, in support of Trump, and that's going to continue for a while.
That is Republican strategist Ron Bonjean. Thank you so much, Ron.
Thank you.
For more on how this could affect the ongoing presidential campaign, we're going to talk to NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben, who has been covering the Trump campaign. Hey, Danielle.
Hey, Scott.
On one hand, this is a big moment, the first time in American history that a former president, possible future president, has been convicted of a felony. On the other hand, America has had 8 years to form very hardened opinions of Donald Trump. You talk to a lot of voters. What has your sense been about how this could change things, if at all?
3 big points here. One is the easy one. For Trump's base, nothing changes. That is a really solid bet you can go with. I go to a lot of his rallies. There are these shirts that are pretty widespread there where people wear his mug shot from his Georgia case on their chest as a badge of honor. They have embraced Trump and his legal troubles. The more he's charged with, the more they stick with him as a sort of victim or martyr. Now let's talk about the broader electorate, though, because according to an NPR Marist PBS NewsHour poll that was released today...
Well timed.
Yeah, right? But that means it was taken before the verdict. A solid majority of Americans, around 2/3, said that a guilty verdict in this case, which has now happened, would not affect their vote. And the rest were pretty evenly split between saying it would make them more or less likely to vote for Trump. The third point I'd add here, though, is that maybe, according to that poll, this won't affect things, but people don't know how it's going to affect them until it affects them. That's all hypothetical. And before Election Day, we have conventions, we have debates, we have Trump sentencing, and all of us and the campaigns are going to be talking about this and seeing how this plays out.
We're talking a few hours after the verdict was announced, and already in that time I feel like the messaging has hardened, particularly on Trump's side. How would you describe it?
It definitely has hardened it. And look, to be honest, it looks a lot like it did before the verdict, except just quite a bit louder and more strident. I mean, when he spoke in the hallway of the courthouse just after the verdict, he kind of veered right into his standard stump speech.
Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now, from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble.
Now, I should add, there's no evidence for the prisons and mental institutions part there, but my point here is that this wasn't a trial about immigration, but he veered into immigration there because he can't stop campaigning. And like your previous guest here said, he's already fundraising off of this verdict, calling himself a political prisoner. And he announced on Truth Social just tonight that there's going to be a press conference at Trump Tower tomorrow at 11, so we'll see what goes on there.
What about President Biden? How has he responded? How has his campaign responded?
Well, the White House is continuing to be careful to not politicize this. The council has said they respect the rule of law. They have no more comment. The campaign is just weaving this, again, into their existing messaging, saying that Trump is a threat to democracy, and he continues to be.
That's NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben. Danielle, thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott.
To All Things Considered from NPR News. Well, we now have a verdict in former President Trump's hush money trial. The last 4 weeks have wreaked havoc in one small corner of Lower Manhattan. In all of this madness, business is continuing as usual. The business of getting married. The office of the city clerk, where people go to get married, is right next door to this trial, or has been. All Things Considered producer Jordan Marie Smith spoke with one of the newlyweds, as well as the Washington Post reporter who first interviewed this couple.
Sam Alcoff and Anna Gold put off getting married for 18 years, until yesterday. But there was just one hitch to, well, getting hitched.
It was the same day that the jury was out deliberating on the Trump trial. So Anna picked up our daughter and I picked up our son, and it was a real circus when we got down there, but we got married.
Their kids are 9 and 13, and Alcoff says they were still eager to see their parents get married, despite it being an especially hectic day.
So when you get off the subway and you're walking towards the courthouse and you see all of these satellite trucks, metal barricades, there's people with big flags and big signs and shouting, and a bunch of reporters waiting.
One of those reporters was Amber Ferguson. She originally reported on the marriages and interviewed Sam Alcoff. Side note, she's also my friend. She found herself drawn into the story in an unexpected way.
Okay, so I was just standing outside. So I saw these two brides, Yelitza Colon and Arribas Pina, and they ran out of their cab and ran up. And then they come back out and they said, "Hey, are you working right now? We need a witness."
You see, journalists aren't usually supposed to get involved in these stories, but Amber couldn't resist.
And the security guard is like, no, you can't come in. He knew I was press. I took off my press badge and I was like, but I'm a witness. It was just a beautiful sight to see.
Both Alcoff and Ferguson said that even though there was chaos outside, there was only good vibes inside the Marriage Bureau.
I think there's a temptation to focus on the craziness of the unending Trump trials, but we can't schedule our lives around what Donald Trump is getting into next.
Alcoff is committed to finding love and community wherever he can, even though, he says, this is an increasingly scary world. Jordan Marie Smith, NPR News.
We continue to follow this historic verdict from Donald Trump's New York hush money trial, where a former U.S. president was found guilty on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. But there is plenty else we're watching, including a big development in American sports history. Yesterday, Major League Baseball formally added Negro League statistics to its official records.
That's right. Author and historian Larry Lester has long fought for historical data to match the historical legends of the Negro Leagues, where black baseball stars played before they were allowed in MLB, to the point of manually reconstructing this data from the box scores of old newspapers.
You can read much more about this fight and other stories on the Consider This newsletter from the team at All Things Considered. Every day we look at one big topic to help you break down what is going on in the world. You can sign up at npr.org/consider this newsletter to get it delivered to your inbox.
Get ready to turn right. Turn right.
And you're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
And you're listening to KWGS News on Public Radio Tulsa. It's 6:48. I'm Ben Abrams. An employee of the Muskogee Nation is being recognized by the White House for saving a life. Courtney Cosby received a Red Cross Certificate of Merit for performing CPR on her son after he had a seizure in January of 2023. Cosby said she first was concerned she wasn't performing CPR correctly.
And then finally he started coughing because I just kept going and started crying. And so I was really thankful that I didn't give up.
Cosby's certificate was signed by President Biden. The Red Cross also recognized Muskogee Nation First Aid instructor Tammy Lewis, who taught Cosby how to perform CPR.
It's really refreshing and rewarding. Figure that. Reward. To have a student to listen, local agent, and take in that instruction and comprehend the instruction, and then to demonstrate the instruction. That's been valuable for those life-saving skills.
The Certificate of Merit is given to people who have used life-saving skills taught by the Red Cross. A bill protecting poultry operations from pollution lawsuits is on its way to the governor's desk. House Bill 4118 aimed to make poultry farms immune from lawsuits if they followed a state-approved plan for disposing of poultry waste. This is KWGS News on Public Radio 89.5.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by Philbrook Museum of Art, home of the Philbrook Fun Menu, with family activities every week, Wednesday through Saturday, including Little Garden Explorers, nature walks, story times, and more. Details at philbrook.org.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Elsa Chang.
And I'm Scott Tetro. A lot of the prosecution's case in former President Donald Trump's hush money trial hung on the testimony of Trump's former fixer and lawyer Michael Cohen. The jury believed that evidence and convicted the former president on all 34 felony charges. This is despite the fact that Trump's defense tried to paint Cohen as, quote, a convicted liar. Lanny Davis represented Michael Cohen in his testimony before Congress and when he pleaded guilty to tax fraud charges and violations of campaign finance laws, and joins us now. Lanny Davis, welcome to All Things Considered.
Thank you. I hope we can talk about the evidence, and I simply tip my hat to Michael Cohen for his bravery and what he went through to make all this possible. But I'd like to talk about the evidence and not about my client.
How do you differentiate those two? Because the evidence was about Michael Cohen's personal character, or the arguments in court were so much so.
So I differentiate, as I've been saying for a while now, that this whole case is about documents and testimony. Michael Cohen has been a faithful and credible narrator of documents that speak for themselves and cannot be disputed, and that's why the verdict was so quick, because the documents don't lie.
What was the most important document to you?
Oh, by far, the one that Mr. Weisselberg, who's the closest person to Donald Trump, in fact, he's in jail and refused to testify because he's so close to Mr. Trump. He wrote out the numbers in his own handwriting, admitted it to evidence in a smoking gun document. The $130,000 that was paid to Stormy Daniels was on that sheet of paper multiplied by 2. There's no way that $130,000 can be legal fees. And the division ended up with $35,000 a month of reimbursements. So the fact that Mr. Trump lied about them being legal fees when it's impossible to explain the $130,000 to Stormy Daniels as legal fees was a decisive document that couldn't be disputed. You didn't need Michael Cohen. You couldn't possibly dispute the fact that $130,000 that Weisselberg wrote down as part of the reimbursement of $35,000 a month times 12, it's all about math. It's not about Michael Cohen.
And yet, both sides seem to paint him as central to the entire case, both the prosecution and the defense. He took up an entire week of testimony on the witness stand. I mean, clearly he played a big role in this.
So again, I'm not going to comment on Michael other than to tout his bravery and the fact that he's been vindicated. But I do want to mention one other very important fact here. The fact that the defense and Mr. Trump actually challenged the completely indisputable fact that the money was given for campaign purposes and not because of a concern about his wife. David Pecker said that, a close friend of Mr. Trump. Hope Hicks said that, a loyal White House aide and campaign aide. So the jury is being told by Mr. Trump that it was not about campaign when the witnesses closest to him said it was. That is what I mean, that this is about documents and this is about evidence. It's not about one individual.
One other point as people try to understand and make sense of this, again, I'm going back to the defense's closing argument that the key connection was taking Michael Cohen's word to tie those payments to Donald Trump being aware of them and approving them. Walk through just one more time for people. Many people are just tuning into this now and trying to make sense of it. What key evidence you saw of making that final connection? Because a lot of time was spent on how he recalled that phone call, and you know how that phone call was really critical in the end of the case and closing arguments and in the final days of testimony.
Well, to make it very simple, if you fall asleep at night and there's no snow on the ground, and you wake up in the morning and it's snow on the ground, you're going to convict beyond a reasonable doubt that it snowed overnight. When Donald Trump lied and called something legal fees, that his own closest counselor wrote down $130,000 times 2, and then the total divided by 12 equals $35,000. Guess what? It snowed overnight. Of course, Donald Trump is lying about legal fees. The minute that the jury reaches that conclusion, the fact that it was booked as legal fees, they know was fraudulent, and that is what I think led them to a unanimous verdict on all 34 counts.
You've been a close observer of this case. Any thoughts on the possible success of an appeal? Trump's team is talking about an immediate appeal.
Yes, and I'd appreciate a chance to make one other comment. His use of the federal court system, the New York State court system, to appeal is a very, very good sign that despite his repudiation of the rule of law, his mockery of the rule of law, he's going to take advantage of the rule of law and appeal. And I tip my hat to him for at least finally acknowledging that he is accountable under the rule of law and he should appeal. And if it's reversed, I will honor that reversal just as I honor a jury verdict that might have acquitted him. At least Donald Trump, for once, has to acknowledge that no person is above the law. He is subject to the rule of law, and that's very important to all of us who are Americans.
Lanny Davis, I don't know if many people have tipped their hat to both Michael Cohen and Donald Trump in the same conversation, but you just did.
No, I have to say I don't celebrate the conviction of a former president of a crime of this magnitude. None of us should celebrate, but we should celebrate that we live in a country that believes in the rule of law.
That is Lanny Davis. He was Michael Cohen's former attorney. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.
And as we end this hour, let us take a moment to recap the events of this day. Former President Trump has been convicted on 34 criminal charges. It is the first time in history that a former president has become a convicted felon. The charges stem from Trump's efforts to hide an alleged affair with adult film actor Stormy Daniels.
Trump spoke to reporters after the verdict was read. He said the verdict was a disgrace and said the trial was rigged and presided over by a conflicted and corrupt judge. Still, sentencing is set for 10 a.m. on July 11th. It is expected that Trump will appeal the verdict.
In remarks earlier this evening, New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg thanked the jury and the alternates for their service, and he described this case as a matter of, quote, public integrity. Bragg said Trump was held to the same standard as any other American without, quote, fear or favor, and said he simply did his job.
There are a lot of remaining questions here about the impact of today's verdict, including what it means for the presidential election, how the Republican Party will respond in the months to come, and what the consequences for the former president will end up being. We will explore all of these questions in the coming days and I suppose months on All Things Considered, as well as Morning Edition and NPR.org.
British TV, including new original crime thriller After the Flood from the producers of Happy Valley, streaming at BritBox.com/NPR. From Procter & Gamble, maker of Nervive. Nervive Nerve Relief is designed to reduce occasional nerve aches, weakness, and discomfort in hands or feet due to aging. Learn more at nervivehealth.com. From Progressive Insurance, Progressive is looking for individuals in a variety of career fields who want to help build a culture of inclusiveness. More information, including application, at progressive.com/careers. And from the Public Welfare Foundation, committed to advancing transformative youth and criminal justice reforms.
On the next Fresh Air, the creator of this year's winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Audio, Johannes Lacour's podcast, You Didn't See Nothing, is about a tragic event that occurred in 1997 when a 13-year-old black boy from Chicago was beaten into a coma after riding his bike into a predominantly white neighborhood. Join us.
This afternoon at 3 and tonight at 9 on Public Radio 89.5.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by the George Kaiser Family Foundation, partnering with the Tulsa Birth Equity Initiative to ensure healthy births with dignity and to reduce maternal health disparities. Information at tulsabei.org.
The listener-supported service of the University of Tulsa, Public Radio 89.5, KWGS HD1, Tulsa.
Marketplace is supported by Spiegel and Grau, publisher of climate activist and renowned investor Tom Steyer's Cheaper, Faster, Better, How We'll Win the Climate War, available at bookstores everywhere.
On the program today, how the U.S. economy fits in globally, how to make sense of that economy, ours, not the globe's, and we'll finish with a beer. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Crowley, a logistics, energy, and maritime solutions company with nearly 135 years of innovation and a commitment to sustainability. Learn more at crowley.com. And by Amazon Business, helping provide a smarter, easier way to get the supplies businesses need to thrive. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.
In Los Angeles, I'm Connor Brisnell. It is Thursday, today the 30th day of May. As always, that is long, everybody. One gets updates on the growth numbers for the American economy. Real gross domestic product is the technical term. 3 times for each quarter of the year. A sneak peek a month after the quarter ends. The final version 3 months after the quarter ends. And in between, what's called revised, which we got today. Meh is a word one might use. Even more meh than had been expected. Really, 1.3% annualized was how fast this economy grew January through March. That's down a bit from the first estimate we got a month ago. And that mehness might turn out to be contagious because U.S. GDP is, by some measures, nearly a quarter of the global economy. So, Marketplace's Elizabeth Trobel starts us off today with the American economy globalized.
When GDP is up and the U.S. economy is strong, Americans buy lots of stuff from all over the world.
The Portuguese wine or Swiss chocolate.
But Tadevik Sekosyan with Texas A&M University says when our economy isn't doing well, our major trading partners feel the pain.
I used to work in Canada, so there they would say when the U.S. sneezes, Canada catches a cold, because U.S. is a major export partner for Canada.
But just how serious that cold can be depends on what's being traded and how much of it. Eric Lund with the Conference Board says considering today's softer GDP numbers, that could signify some sniffles.
Consumer debt levels are up, savings are down, pandemic savings are gone, inflation remains high, interest rates remain high.
He says as U.S. consumers second-guess their spending, China, a major exporter, could feel the pinch.
Slower demand growth from the U.S., coupled with what appears to be higher tariffs coming potentially out of the Biden administration, these are all problems from sort of the Chinese perspective.
In addition to U.S. GDP data, there are other indicators. that the rest of the world should watch too, says David Wilcox with the Peterson Institute and Bloomberg Economics.
The U.S. economy has averaged adding about 240,000 jobs per month, and that's still indicative of a really healthy and robust jobs market.
He says you could even think of slower GDP growth as the cooling the U.S. economy needs. I'm Elizabeth Trovall for Marketplace.
On Wall Street today, as we head downhill into the weekend, I'll tell you what, traders just got up on the wrong side of the bed again. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. Scanlon on the program a couple of times over the past couple of years. She is a financial educator. She got her started blogging and making TikToks explaining the economy and the Federal Reserve and pretty much everything else. She also, and this might be how you've heard of her, if not here, she's the one who came up with the term Vibecession. She has now taken to the printed page, Kyla has, in a new book called In This Economy, How Money and Markets Really Work. So we have gotten her on the phone again. Kyla, it's good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So we're going to do something a little different this time. I want to talk about, because it's your book and you've worked hard and sold into this for a couple of years. I want to talk a little bit more about you than we have in the past. How did economic literacy and financial education become a thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, it really started in college. So I grew up in Kentucky, went to school in Kentucky on scholarship, and in my journey throughout college, I had a blog about options trading because I thought it was really important to tell people.
Just because you wanted to do a college blog about options trading?
Yeah, I mean, because I was doing it and I was like, people need to know, like, this is important information. And so that's kind of like where the focus on education started. And then I went to Capital Group out in Los Angeles and kind of noticed even more so that there was like a gap between how people understood the economy and like what was actually happening. And so when GameStop happened, I started making this content, but it was really like, it's kind of this drive of coming from Kentucky and maybe not having access to like economics education in the same way that I would somewhere else. And then going into industry and being like, wow, there's a really big need for the everyday person to at least have access to these tools.
You made your mark in social media, right? With TikTok and sort of directly connecting with people. And I guess I wonder, why have you decided that you're going to write a book now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I wrote this book when I was 8 years old about a penguin and wrote books all throughout growing up. And so, like, when the opportunity came to write a book, I love books. Like, I'm a big reader, and to be able to even be considered for the opportunity to write one, I had to do it. And then number two, a lot of my social media videos are responding to the news. I try to do as much education as I can within, 90 seconds, but books are static. And I think a lot of the knowledge that is in the book is static. And so I wanted a place for people to go where they could use it as a reference guide. Like, each chapter is relatively standalone, and you can like read the inflation chapter without having to read the labor markets chapter. And I just wanted something that people could go to outside of the noise of social media.
Although, of course, you should read the inflation and the labor market chapters together because it's all a piece, man. It's all a piece.
Yeah, it's true. That's like the first chapter is the Economic Kingdom, showing the interconnectivity. Yeah.
Right. No, exactly, right. And that's well, look, but that's the thing you have stressed. And look, I watch all your videos, and I follow you on social, and everybody here should. None of this happens in isolation, right? People are the economy, as you like to say, and what we do really matters across everything in this economy.
Exactly. Yeah, people are the economy. And I think like another reason why I wrote this book is because I think we do people a disservice. I think you do a great job, like helping people understand. But I think on large, we do kind of a disservice. We pretend that people like don't need to understand the economy, when I think like just understanding basic components is probably really important.
So look, along those lines, and thank you for your kind words, and right back at you. But you had a post, I don't know, well, like a week or so ago, talking about the disconnect in the recent, I guess it was Guardian Harris poll, about what the actual economy is doing versus what
people think the economy is doing. And TLDR on this one is people think the economy is way worse than it is when actually it's pretty good, although price levels are elevated and inflation's a pressure cooker, and we totally get that. What is the answer to helping people understand the economy better? Because you can't just spout data at them and say, here, see, it's not so bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely hard. I actually was listening to you and Make Me Smart about, like, you were talking about the media component of this, and I think that's true. I do think it does boil down to how people are receiving this information, and you can't pound them down with data, because I think that just makes it worse most of the time. You kind of have to be anecdotal, and you have to be accessible, and you have to give examples. But yeah, it's a really tough problem to solve, and it's one that I've been wrestling with since that survey came out, because I was just so astounded with those numbers.
It's all over.
It's really hard. Tell me about the title of this book, In This Economy?
Yeah, well, that's a meme, you know. I think that a couple TV shows have used it as a line. When we were wrestling with the title, I was like, what if we just kind of made the title a meme? Because that's kind of how I got my start, and that's sort of a fun way to learn about the economy is through meme. And so the title is meant to be fun, because hopefully the book is a fun way to learn about the economy.
So let's talk actually about the economy. Last time, maybe 2 times ago you were on, I forget, we talked about Vibe Session and was it over, and yes, but maybe not, and now it's, I don't know. From where you sit and what you're trying to do with helping people understand this economy, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, consumer sentiment is still, it's improved, but, like, you know, there's still funky stuff with measuring it. I think that there's a lot of uncertainty going into the election. I think that's going to create kind of an edge to the economy. But the economy is, you know, it's moving along. The labor market's okay. Inflation is going down, maybe not at the pace that we would want it to, but it's improving. You know, the stock market's up. Stock market's not the economy, but, like, it's going okay. And so I think that's the thing with the economy is it's going okay, but I still think people are feeling relatively bad about it. And that's, yeah, where it gets kind of hairy to talk about a good economy when no one thinks it's good.
Is there I asked you this last time, and I'd be interested to see if your thoughts on it have changed. As we go about describing this economy, those of us in this business, and don't get a lot of traction with making people understand the subtleties of it, how do you think about that?
One of my favorite lines is "Nuance doesn't sell," and I think
yeah, totally.
yeah, and I think that kind of summarizes that.
Yeah.
I think it's 2 things, right? Like, number one, it's hard, and you're telling people things are good, like things are fine, you should be feeling okay. And then also, number 2, like, the economy is such a personal experience. Like, everybody has a personal inflation rate, everybody has a personal path with the labor market, and so I think it's really hard because we oftentimes talk about the economy as a whole when a lot of people interpret the economy not as a whole. If your experience of the economy is not at all what people are telling you, you know, of course you're not going to believe them. Yeah. And I think that's where it gets really tough, is like, the economy is art. At the end of the day, it's humans, and art is hard to interpret sometimes.
You should buy her book. You should follow her on all the socials. Her handle there is @KylaScan. The book is called In This Economy, How Money and Markets Really Work. Kyla Scanlon, really good to talk to you again.
Thanks so much, Kai.
The Beige Book came out this week, the Federal Reserve's 8 times a year summary of regional and national economic conditions. It's always full of interesting little tidbits, the Beige Book is, about where this economy is right now. 2 of them caught our eye this time, 2 little tidbits. The Minneapolis Fed quoted one manufacturer who said, "I don't expect to fill any of my open jobs. We are increasing our capital expenditures to adapt our processes to smaller headcounts." Reading between the lines, more automation, fewer workers. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston said this, quote, "A large clothing retailer let go 150 workers by closing a call center, citing the shift toward more automated customer service technologies as the driver." Marketplace's Stephanie Hughes is on the replacing labor costs with capital expenditures beat for us today.
Manufacturers have been dealing with a labor shortage for years. Some are frustrated either because they can't find workers or don't want to pay the higher wages workers want to fill open jobs.
And as a result, might be turning to available technology to substitute for additional hiring.
Lonnie Golden is an economics professor at Penn State Abington. He says there are all kinds of benefits to spending on machines.
Less PTO, less payroll taxes, less managerial motivation techniques.
Right now happens to be a good time for manufacturers to be taking down their done is better than perfect sign.